This is the kind of thing you have heard over and over and over. It's the same old Christmas story. It's Mary and Jesus and Joseph and the wise men, which you've heard since you went to Sunday school, when your mother made you go when you were 6 years old. And we have heard it. You know, it's like so many things in the Bible. We have heard it and heard it and heard it till it isn't really real anymore. It has become flat. The people in the Bible so often are cardboard figures. You know, they are one-dimensional. You just see the flat of them. And you forget that if you believe that this Christmas story is true, and I'm assuming that you wouldn't be in this room at all, you wouldn't have gotten up and made the effort, unless you believe that the Christmas story is true, that it really happened to real people that were flesh and blood, who felt the same things we feel: fear, hunger, pain, anger. All of the emotions that we felt, they felt. And that's what I want to do, is tell you the same old Christmas story, but tell you as if it happened to real people. And a great deal of what I will say is not in the Bible. It's based on archaeology and history and our knowledge of customs of the period, because we have no reason to think that Mary and Joseph were anything different than the average couple living in Palestine at this period, that they followed the same customs that everybody else did. And you can build that into the bare bones of this Christmas story so that these people come to life. Mary and Joseph knew each other from birth. They're bound to it. They lived in a place so little it makes tiny flats look like the center of the world. It was a rural backwater. There was nothing there. One little dirt street with a dozen, maybe half a dozen, little mud houses. You know those houses you built in Bible school out of cardboard boxes and made papier-mâché and stuck all over them, and they slept on the roof in the hot weather. You remember. That's the kind of house they lived in, with a ladder on the outside. Absolutely no privacy. Now, you talk about gossip in a small town. The minute that Mary and Joseph began to look at each other, everybody in town knew it, you see. And they grew up knowing the same things, the same life, probably never went more than 5 or 10 miles from home in their lives until the big trip. They had both, however, been brought up in good traditional Jewish homes. Both of them knew what we call the Old Testament. They knew the history of the chosen people. They knew about the Messiah. They had been brought up in an age of expectation and excitement. People were thinking in terms of the end of the world, the coming of the Lord. All of these things were bred into them as they grew up. Now, when I say they grew up, I mean that they reached marriageable age, which in Palestine at that time was 13 for a girl and 16 or 17 for a boy. You were a woman when you were 13 and a responsible man when you were 16 or 17. You were expected to be ready to take on the responsibility of a family. So, when Mary was 13 and he was about 16 or 17, he decides he wants to marry Mary, and she's not supposed to know anything about it. Get this, he goes to his parents and asks their permission to get married. Now, times have changed. After he got his parents' permission, he went and got her parents' permission, and nobody ever mentioned it to Mary. She was not concerned. Of course, she and everybody else in town knew exactly what was going on, word for word, motion by motion. But the betrothal was arranged by the families with no apparent contact between Mary and Joseph. And when this arrangement had been made, and the families had agreed on the dowry and all this stuff, they entered into the ceremony called the Kiddushin, which is the betrothal ceremony that is part of the Jewish religion and custom. And this is what that word espoused means. I had some child in the 7th grade ask me what espoused meant. Espoused means betrothed, engaged. But this kiddushin is far more for a Jewish couple than what we mean by engagement. It is virtually marriage. If you are betrothed in the sense that we are speaking of, then you are bound together as though married in every way except that you live together in the same house. The couple continues to live with their parents and therefore are not setting up housekeeping. This year is the year when they get everything ready. And however, though, if Joseph, say, would die between the year of the betrothal and of the wedding, then she would be his legal widow. She would be entitled to all of the privileges of being his widow. His family would be responsible for her. If either one of them went with someone else during this betrothal, then it was adultery. And each one was bound in a final relationship by this betrothal. The marriage ceremony was almost an anticlimax. It was when they actually moved into the same house, and she and her family walked down to the house that they had established together during this year of betrothal, and he welcomed her into the house, and they ate a ceremonial meal, and that was it. The betrothal was the big deal. And this is what Mary and Joseph entered into now at this, what we consider age of childhood. And yet, you know, there was no teenage. Teenage is a modern invention. You were a child and then you were an adult. Puberty was it. You didn't have this long technological education. We have invented that. You were a child and then you were an adult. So that Mary and Joseph were considered by their contemporaries and the people who lived around them to be adults and were completely ready for marriage and for this betrothal ceremony. So they started getting their house ready. I don't know what you put in the hope chest in Palestine, but whatever it was, this is what she was doing. He was trying to establish another one of those little mud houses for them to live in. This was the get it together period. And Mary was still living at home. And one day when she was at home by herself, working on her hope chest, the angel of the Lord appeared unto her. And the angel came into her and said, Hail thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And I think this is the biggest understatement in the Bible. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying, and cast in her mind what manner of salutation this might be. Can't you imagine that she would? Here is this 13-year-old girl sitting in a mud house in Palestine, and an angel comes into her, a heavenly vision, a messenger of God. And she wondered what it might be. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. Now Mary knows what those words mean. Mentally she knows what they mean, because she knows these phrases in here, the Son of the Most High, the throne of the house of David. She knows that those are the religious phrases used to mean the Messiah, the promised king whom God would send to deliver his chosen people from bondage. She knows what that means in her head, but how could she possibly be expected to apply them to herself? Not me. I mean, this is a grand idea, and I'm in favor of it. But, oh Lord, not me. I'm a plain little girl in the country. Why me, Lord? And she really doesn't in her heart believe this can be happening to her. And the angel, knowing that she needs some kind of help, some kind of reassurance, says to her that her cousin Elizabeth, who is an aged and barren woman and lives down in one of the cities of Judah to the south, is going to or has conceived a child, and she who was known as the barren is now to have a child. And I do want to mention the fact that this poor, wrinkled, bent over, barren old woman was probably 28, 30. You see, they married at 13 and they died at 40 or 45. The average lifespan was 40. So this poor old woman was maybe 30. If she was really over the hill, she was 30. Now, here sits this child, and she has seen an angelic vision. And this angel has said to her, you are going to be the physical mother of God. And the angel went away and left her sitting there all by herself, the same person, in the same little room, in the same little town. And she's been told that she's going to be the mother of God. Can you imagine what her mental state must have been? I'm sure that at first she thought this didn't happen. This really didn't happen. Something like this, haven't you had an experience so vivid and so intense and so out of your normal realm that you don't believe it happened? But it must have happened. She can't dismiss it was a dream. She knows it did happen. So the first thing she wants to do is go tell her mother. Well, what's she going to tell her mother? You know? And if the angel had wanted her mother to know, she'd have come to Mary when her mother was there. Well, the person to go to is Joseph. Joseph will understand. Joseph will know, because after all, Joseph is involved in this too. And Joseph will know. So she goes to Joseph, and Joseph doesn't know anything about it. She gives him every opening, and can't you hear it? All the little conversational openings she gives him to tell her about it, and he doesn't know anything about it. And the child is terrified. She doesn't know what to do. And out of all this mental muddle comes one clear, hard fact that she can verify, and that is that Elizabeth is going to have a child, which is out of all possibility. Now, the angel told her that, and she can verify it. So she asked her mother's permission to go down and visit Elizabeth. And her mother said, oh, fine, isn't that sweet of her to want to go visit her old cousin Elizabeth. She packed up and joined a family that was traveling south, and she went to Elizabeth's house and came to this little town and walked into Elizabeth's house, probably totally unannounced. You know, there's no communication. When you went to visit, you just went to visit. You didn't tell them you were coming. You just arrived at the door. So more than likely, Elizabeth had no idea that Mary was coming and had had no contact with Mary between the time she came and years before. And it came to pass that when Elizabeth heard the salutation of Mary, the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Ghost. And she spake out with a loud voice and said, Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. And whence is this to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? It's true. If Elizabeth knows it, without being told, and if she is pregnant, as the angel said, then that part is true. The rest must be true too. And so she accepts the fact that she, in truth, is the mother of the Messiah, and that somehow she must deal with this. She must find a way to accept God's will for her life. And I don't think it was a magic, easy thing for her to do. She had to accept this burden, which at this point was a burden. She must accept it and live up to what God has expected of her. So she stayed with Elizabeth for 3 months and had a grand time, no problems, everything was fine. But at the end of 3 months, she's got to go home. The time is coming when she's going to have to tell somebody about this thing. She's not going to be able to hide it any longer. 3 or 4 months. So she goes home, hoping and praying that somewhere, while she was gone, an angel appeared to somebody and straightened this thing out for her. And nothing had happened. Nobody knew. And she had to tell her mother and father and Joseph that she was expecting this baby. Now, telling her parents would be bad enough, but telling Joseph would be awful. Just awful. And it must have been that she had to tell him. There was no other way for him to know. Now she goes into him and she says, look, I am still the sweet, pure Mary that you love, and I'm going to have a baby. But don't worry. An angel came to me and told me that I'm magically going to be pregnant and I'm going to have God's son. Now, come on. What would you think? Well, and that's what Joseph thought, just exactly. You got it in your head. He's human too. And he thinks exactly what you would expect him to think. And he is killed. Here is this beautiful little girl that he's loved all his life, and he was going to marry her and set up housekeeping. Everything was going to be blissful. He didn't know any better. Everything was going to be blissful and happy and heavenly. And she was the perfect epitome of the Jewish girl, pure, sweet, loving, and look what she's done to him. She's totally betrayed him. And he's sick. Because living in the tiny little world he lives in, he has 3 choices of what he can do. He can shut up and marry her and let everybody laugh for the rest of his life at him about this 6-month baby they're going to have, because everybody's going to know it. The population wasn't a whole lot bigger than what's in this room. And there are no secrets. And he can bear that kind of scorn all his life. And the baby too. Or he can, what the Bible calls, put her away privily. He can pay a passing group of travelers, a caravan or something. He can pay them to take her away with them to wherever they're going till the money runs out, and then leave her wherever they are. And she has the baby by herself and tries to support herself and live alone and raise the child. She's totally set away, cut off from all her family and everything. That's his second choice. His third choice is to declare that she is an adulteress, which is what he thinks. This is what he believes. And the legal form is for him to appear before the priests of the synagogue, the rabbis, and declare that she is an adulteress. And it's going to be pretty obvious that he's right. And the punishment for adultery was to take the woman out. No punishment for the man, get this. They take the woman out to a cliff outside the village, and they push her off, and she falls down on the rocks below the cliff. And they watch her, and if she moves, they throw rocks at her until she doesn't move anymore. And when they're sure she's dead, they go back to town and leave her body there for the birds and the animals. Now those are his choices. And he's loved this girl all his life. And when Joseph thought on these things, being a just man and not willing to make a public example of her, he was minded to put her away privily. But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee thy wife Mary, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. Then Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him his wife. Finally, the angel comes to Joseph. And I really don't understand why they waited so long. Why put them through all of this? But now Joseph realizes. Now Joseph's got a knot in his middle, just like she's had all this time, wondering what to do. Because you see, he's going to be the earthly father of God. He is going to have the responsibility of making an earthly home and rearing God, the Son of God. Now that is a responsibility to accept. And these two children do. And they move into their house, and they set up housekeeping, and they settle down just to wait out the time for the birth of this baby. Every day a little magic. And things go along very normally, and they have no reason to think that things will ever be different than they've always been, and they can live right here and have the baby and let the Lord worry about it. And the world won't let them do that. The world intervenes because 1,000,000 miles away in Rome, the emperor decides that he's not getting enough tax money out of the Judeans and the Israelites, and he's got to have a head count in order to equalize his tax system. There has been tax revision since the beginning of time, and a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And everybody had to go back to the town in which he originally was born, or his family was. And since Joseph was of the house and lineage of David, he had to go back to Bethlehem to be counted, because that's where David came from. He was from Bethlehem. Well, he doesn't want to take this girl with him, but there are no exceptions. She's got to go. Everybody's got to go. And really, when you come right down to it, why worry so much? If this is God's son and he intends that he should be born, what's going to happen? It's going to be all right. So they load up on their little donkey with enough food. It's 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And it's all exposed road. There were no hotels. There were no restaurants. They took enough food with them to eat. And they slept on the ground at night. Even if there had been somewhere to buy food, they didn't have any money. And they'd never in their lives been away from home. Here is this couple. I guess by now she must be 14 and he's 18. They've never been more than 5 miles from their parents. And she is imminently expecting a baby. And they start off on a journey that to them would be like you and me walking to Mexico City. It's that far and that rough. It was rough territory. And they had to go along the Jordan Valley because they would have passed through Samaria, and you didn't do that. Nazareth was up here, and then Samaria, and then Judea. So they had to go down the river valley, which made it even further. But they made the trip. And on that 5th day, as they came near Bethlehem, they saw Jerusalem. Never in the world did they think they would see Jerusalem. With the sun on the golden dome of the temple, this for them was the center of religion. And it was almost magic for them to look over there across the valley and be able to see the temple and see Jerusalem. But they wound on past it, and the road goes right through the Valley of Gethsemane and the Mount of Olives. I think it's interesting that as he went to be born, he passed through the same area exactly where he went to die. And it was late on the 5th day, getting dark, when they got to Bethlehem. And by this time, Mary must have known that the baby was going to come now. And here they are, 2 children, alone, far away in a strange land. And Joseph thinks, now if I can get to Bethlehem, I can get help. I'm out here on the road, but if I can get to Bethlehem, it's going to be the city of David. It's going to be a big place, and I can get help when I get there. Because this poor boy now, this may be God's son and all of that, but he's the one that's there on the road with the girl and the donkey, and it's getting dark, and there's nowhere to stay, and she's going to have a baby, and he doesn't know any women to help him. He's the one that's there. And they get to Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is one dirt street running north and south, and 2 dirt streets running east and west. There are maybe 50 houses. It's a big place, and it is wall-to-wall people. Everybody is there. There's not only no room in the inn, there's no room in the street. And there's no room in the field, and there's no room anywhere, and nobody's got time to fool with this little couple. He's on his own, and so is she. There is no room in the inn. But the innkeeper, who must have been an awfully kind man, harassed, Can't you imagine? He is just nearly out of his mind by this time, with all these people trying to get in and get out and something to eat, and he's got people sleeping in his bed. He rented his bed last week. There is nowhere. And he looks at this pitiful little couple, so frightened and alone. And he says, well, underneath the inn, down in the side of the hill, there's a cave where I put the animals that my guests have ridden in on. See, this inn was built up on a hill, kind of like the prow of a ship almost. It stuck out on a hill. And there was a cave down underneath the inn, a natural cavern. This is a very common phenomenon in this part of the country. And there's a little path going down either side from the inn into this cave. And it was sheltered, and it was private, and relatively warm. You know, the nights in the desert are cold. The nights here were very cold. Days were warm, but nights were cold. So Joseph and Mary took their donkey, and they went down to the cave under the hill, and he spread out some straw, and lit a lantern, and spread his cloak on the straw, pushed the animals back. And there, on a cold, starry night, in the back end of nowhere, to two frightened Judean peasant children, God was born. God became flesh and dwelt among men. And that seems so far away and so long ago. And that's why you're here. Because that baby was born in that cave 1,000 years ago. You came to State Street Church today. And because you are here, in his name, then this day, in this room, for you and me, Christ is born. Everybody gets up and eats. I don't know how to turn this off. Stop.